Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard Moglen, and welcome back to the weekly watch list video sponsored by MarketSmith. As always, we'll go through both the fundamentals and technical setups of all the stocks on my focus list, and let's dive right in and start with AHCO. So overall, very strong revenue growth the past few quarters, blowout estimates for 2021 in terms of annual EPS up 152%. Not the greatest IBD ratings, and the composite rating is only an 88, but you have a nice growth in fund ownership over the past few years, although you don't have any high quality funds in this stock just yet. And look at the chart, you can see it's basing now. The RS line is pulling back along with the price, and the overall RS rating is a 91. And going over to the technical setup in TC2000, what I want to see is a breakout above either this pivot that was set on Friday at 38.85, or eventually a breakout on above average volume above 39.76, which is the previous all-time high. Next up, we've got Corsair Gaming, and you can see very strong earnings and sales growth going back the past few quarters. Last quarter, earnings up 382%, sales up 61%, after-tax margins up 10.6%. But if you look at the estimates for 2021 in terms of annual EPS, you can see it's actually down 9%, with the revisions down as well. But the IBD ratings are strong, and the overall composite rating is a 98. You have nice growth in fund ownership the past 2 quarters, and you also have Fidelity Contra Fund owning shares as well. If you look at the chart, you can see it advanced strongly from its stage 1 IPO base and now has pulled back to the 50 SMA a few times. It just retook it on this past Friday. The overall RS rating is 94, and the RS line is basing along with the price. As for the entry setup, what I want to see is a breakout above this high on above average volume, and that's 38.90, and eventually a breakout above this pivot at 44.60, and then challenging all-time highs ideally. Moving on, we've got CrowdStrike, and you can see very strong growth in terms of earnings and sales the past few quarters. Last quarter, earnings up 214%, sales up 86%, and after-tax margins up 8% as well. The estimates for 2022 are very strong, up 45% in terms of annual EPS. IBD ratings are strong. The composite rating is 98. You've got nice growth in fund ownership over the past few years, and Fidelity Contra Fund with a position. Looking at the chart, it's moved up well from this stage 2 cup, and is now pulling back a little bit and tightening up on this right-hand side above the 21 EMA. So as for the entry setup, I want to see a breakout above this high right here on above average volume at 228.50, and I'll add to my existing position at that time. And I like how on this pullback, it is on below average volume, and it's really getting tight on this right-hand side, as I said. So moving on, we've got Datadog. And overall, you can see very strong growth in terms of earnings and sales the past few quarters. Last quarter, earnings up 400%, sales up 61%, and after-tax margins up 10.3%. The estimates for annual EPS in 2021 are up 11%, with the revisions up as well. The EPS rating is an 80, and the overall composite rating is an 88. Looking at the fund ownership, you can see a really strong move the past few quarters from 229 all the way up to 768 funds, and you have 4 high-quality funds in there as well. Looking at the chart, you can see it's in this stage 2B cup with handle with a standard pivot of 111.49, and had nice kind of a wick action on this Friday, setting us up for a potential move up next week. So as for the entry setup, what I want to see is either a wick setup, as I said, or a breakout above this pivot at 107.74 on above average volume. Next up, we've got DKNG, and you've got really strong revenue growth the past few quarters. But you can see it's not supposed to be profitable in 2020 or in 2021. The EPS rating is very poor at 26, and the overall composite rating isn't much better at 76. Looking at the fund ownership, there's been very strong growth here from 17 funds to 414, and you have a whole bunch of high-quality funds in there as well, which definitely is reassuring. Looking at the chart, it's also within a cup and handle, a stage 4, with a standard pivot of 55.98. And as for the entry setup, what I'm looking for is either a breakout above this high, which would be a 2-2 strat reversal, and that is at 53.56. I like how it's pulling back to the 21 EMA on below average volume. Or I also want to see a kind of breakout above this high at 55.98 on above average volume. And overall, I like this constructive pattern. You've got a very strong prior uptrend and now a kind of longer term basing period. Moving on, we've got DocuSign, and it's been quite a while since this has kind of been on my radar after the strong uptrend from the March lows. But overall, it's moving up the right-hand side of this stage 2 consolidation, and is setting up another potential buy point here as it flags out on below average volume. So overall, very strong growth here. You've got triple-digit earnings growth this past quarter, up 100%, sales up 53%, and after-tax margins up 12% as well. The EPS estimates for 2022 are very strong as well, of 50% with revisions up, and the overall EPS rating is an 84, and the overall composite rating is a very strong 98. Looking at the fund ownership, you can see a nice increase from 404 to 1385, and you have 4 high-quality funds in there as well. Taking a look at the chart, we already talked about it a little bit, but overall the RS line is basing on the price, and the overall RS rating is a 90. Talking about the entry setup, what I'm looking for is a breakout above this high at 263 on above average volume, or a potential undercut and rally through this low or the 21 EMA. Moving on, we've got another cybersecurity company in FireEye, and you can see very strong growth in terms of earnings the past few quarters, not so much in terms of sales, but you can see the estimates for 2021 are pretty strong, up 21% with the revisions up as well. The EPS rating is a 75, and the overall composite rating is a 94. Looking at the fund ownership, you can see a gradual increase over the past 2 years, but you do not have any high-quality funds in there just yet. Looking at the chart, you can see it exploded upward on huge volume after the stage 1 cup with handle, and now is pulling back to 21 EMA on below average volume. The overall RS rating is an 85, and the RS line is basing along with the price. And as for the entry setup, I'm looking for a breakout above this high at 23.26 on above average volume, and eventually a challenge of all-time highs through this pivot and then this pivot at 25.53. So that is FI, and next up we've got Farfetch Limited, and you can see very strong growth in terms of revenue the past few quarters, but you can see it's not supposed to be profitable within the next 2 years. The EPS rating is a 25, group RS of B+, and the overall composite rating is only an 80. Looking at the fund ownership, you can see a gradual increase over the past 2 years, not really explosive, but you do have one high-quality fund investing into this company. And as for the chart, you can see this super strong move it had from the stage 1 cup with handle, and now it's forming out a little bit of a shelf here against the 21 EMA on below average volume. And overall, the RS rating is a 98, and the RS line is pulling back along with the price. And as for the entry setup, what I'm looking for is a breakout above this high at 65.23, and this is a potential wick setup next week, or eventually a breakout above this high at 65.54. So that is FTCH. And next up, we've got Net and Cloudflare. And overall, you can see strong revenue growth the past few quarters at about 50%, but you can see it's not supposed to be profitable within the next 2 years. The overall EPS rating is only a 54, and the overall composite rating is only 82. But you've got very strong growth in terms of funds the past 2 years, and you have 3 high-quality funds in there as well. Looking at the chart, you can see it moved up quite well from the stage 2 cup and has since pulled back to the 50 SMA, where I started my most recent position, and now has bounced strongly above the 21 EMA and now pulled back late last week. And as for the entry setup, I'm looking for a breakout above this high at 84.99, or potentially an undercut and reclaim of the 21 EMA, and then I would add to my current position. Next up, we've got NVCR, and you can see very strong growth in terms of earnings and sales the past few quarters. Last quarter, earnings up 350%, sales up 44%, and after-tax margins up 7% as well. And there's also very strong growth estimates for annual EPS in 2021, up 71% with revisions up as well. The EPS rating is a 75, and the overall composite rating is a 90. And looking at the fund ownership, you can see a gradual increase over the past 2 years and 3 high-quality funds in there as well. And as for the chart, you can see it moved up quite well from the stage 2 consolidation, and now is kind of tightening up a little bit on the right-hand side against the 21 EMA, forming a short-term pivot at these highs. So as for the entry setup, I'm looking for a breakout above this high right here at 174.68, or potentially this one, which would be a 2-2 reversal, and this is at 172.95, and eventually I want to see a challenge of all-time highs, which is at 182.74. And overall, I like the constructive action, nice volume on this breakout. You can see I got shook out here before, along with a lot of people, but then you've got nice volume during this uptrend, and then within this kind of sideways chop, you've got lower than average volume. So that is NVCR. And next up, we've got Redfin. And overall, you can see not the greatest growth numbers. Last quarter earnings were up 350%, but sales were down 1%, although after-tax margins were up 14.4%. And you can see it's not supposed to be profitable within the next 2 years. The EPS rating is a 70, and the overall composite rating is a 92. Looking at the fund ownership, you can see it's basically doubled over the past 2 years, and you have 2 high-quality funds in there as well. And Redfin has moved up quite strongly from the stage 1 cup, and then pulled back to the 21 EMA, moved up, and now is pulling back once again on below average volume. The overall RS rating is a 95 and the RS line is basing along with the price. And as for the entry setup, I'm looking for an undercut and reclaim of the 21 EMA or potentially a 2-2 reversal next week and eventually a challenge of these pivots at around 81.69. Moving on, we've got Unity Software. You can see decent growth in terms of revenue the past few quarters. Last quarter sales were up 53%. It wasn't profitable and the after-tax margins were down 6.5%. And you can also see it's not supposed to be profitable within the next 2 years. The EPS rating is only a 49 and the composite rating is only a 73. However, you do have a lot of funds already owning shares in this company, and you also have one high quality fund in there as well. And taking a look at the chart, you can see it moved up strongly from its stage 1 IPO base, then pulled back to the 50 SMA here, and then again here late last week, and then had a nice move on this past Friday. And the overall RS rating is a 91, and the RS line is basing along with the price. And as for the entry setup, I'm looking for a breakout above this high at 158.60 on above average volume. And I like the move on Friday. You've got a 3-bar break and also a 2-2 reversal based on the strat method against the 50 SMA. So last on the list, we've got Zoom Infotech, and taking a look at the earnings and sales, you can see very strong growth here. Last quarter earnings up 120%, sales up 56%, and after-tax margins up 34.7%. Looking at the estimates for 2021, they're strong as well, up 47%. The EPS rating is a 75, but the overall composite rating is only a 45. Looking at the fund ownership, you can see nice growth already in terms of funds, and you have 3 high-quality funds in there as well. Looking at the chart, you can see it's still within its IPO due diligence phase, and overall is within the stage 1 consolidation with a standard pivot of 53.08, but it is forming a potential pivot right at this high right here. And as for the entry setup, I'm looking for either a breakout above this high at 48.36 and eventually a challenge of these kind of intermediate highs at about 53.08 or potentially a undercut and reclaim of these key moving averages. So that's my plan for ZI, and overall my top 3 setups for this week are CrowdStrike through this pivot for an ad. We've got U for follow through this pivot as well on above average volume. And finally, Corsair for a follow through off the 50 SMA bounce. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. And just in general, it's very important for you guys to keep in mind that earnings season is upon us. So make sure you guys know when companies are set to report. The earliest on this focus list is the 4th, and that would be, or actually it's the 2nd, and that would be FI. So keep that in mind for anything you own or are looking to purchase. Know when that earnings report is supposed to come out, and also check whether it's before or after the market close. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you are new. And I'll see you guys in future videos.